Hey! Happy Monday. Welcome to Hobby Evolution. Episode 626, Monday. No Monday morning quarterbacking of the Major League Baseball draft. And we'll talk draft. First sip of the day. Good morning, Rich. Uncle Rich in the house. George with us. What is up? Rich is watching on a rare Monday. Happy to have you. Welcome to the work week. I don't know if Dan will watch this later, but our friend Korean Cardboard Dan on a plane somewhere over the Pacific Ocean on his way to the States. So safe travels to Dan if he's watching at some point. John is with us. What is up? Good morning. Not been around for a few weeks as COVID's floored me. I hate to see that. Hopefully over the worst of it now will get better. Hopefully you're on the track to feeling better. David, good morning. Victor, Abraham, what is up? Good morning all. Scott's with us. Card show week. Zach and Porter, hello. Wasn't that Larry King? Brooklyn, hello. Was that Larry King? I know Rich will know the answer to that. I think that was Larry. Was that Larry King? Brooklyn, hello. Card show week, Madison card show this coming Saturday, Sheraton Hotel on John Nolan Drive. Show hours 9 a.m. to 3. Free admission, 120 tables. I think I'm sold out. I've got a tracker. I think I'm short one table, but I have like 2 or 3 follow-ups. And of course, there's always going to be the late cancels and hopefully preventing the no-shows. But sometimes it's last month. I had a couple of regulars didn't necessarily no-show, but couldn't make it. So always have that. But many times the no-shows are from people I don't know, dealers I don't know, first-timers. So now first-timers are on prepay, so preventing that. Scott just got out of COVID quarantine today, one of the best Mondays in a while. That is good news to hear, not about having COVID, but getting out of COVID quarantine. Rich says we also had Lloyd Lindsay Young, who would pick a random town and go, hello. That's good. That's good. Terry, what is up? Good morning. So what happened this weekend? I didn't go on a bike ride yesterday. About twice during the day, I'm like, I should go on a bike ride. And I didn't. I don't know. I didn't have the motivation to go on a bike ride. And I think for yesterday, I was so excited for the baseball draft. I am a draft nerd especially, I love the basketball draft and I don't watch the NBA, but I do love college basketball. I love the football draft and I really don't watch the NFL or college football, despite all the Bowman U football behind me. But when it comes to Major League Baseball draft, I watch the big leagues and I follow closely the minor leagues, particularly the Cubs. But generally, I follow the prospects. So it's a big day. In fact, my draft days go back to the very first draft that I remember getting into, like really submerging myself into the baseball draft. 2002, I had a subscription to Baseball America, and that year, I believe, was the first year MLB.com broadcasted the draft online. Now, when I say broadcasted the draft, it wasn't with a panel going over, scouting reports. It wasn't a fancy show at the LA Live Center in Los Angeles. It was audio only, and it was basically they had each war room mic'd up. And so, Baltimore Orioles, who's your selection? And then they would play the mic. They'd go to the mic in Baltimore. The Baltimore Orioles with the first selection take Jackson Holliday, shortstop, wherever high school. And then they would give they each have like basically like inmate numbers, draft, 6, 8, 4, 2, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that was it. And then Arizona Diamondbacks, you're next. We take Andruw Jones, blah, 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 blah. Next. That was it. That was how they draft. That was that's how far the draft has come in 20 years. In fact, less than 20 years. When was the first? It's only been on TV maybe 10 years now. Maybe less than 10. Immersing. Thank you, Rich. Immersing. So I began immersing myself in the baseball draft in 2002. And I just love the draft. My buddy Scott, I don't know if you're watching, Scott, but we've got to find your files. He's got files from like 30 years of Cubs baseball drafts, and I shared a couple photos on Twitter yesterday. The 1984 scouting reports that included Greg Maddux, the 1989 Cubs draft board, like who they had 1 through 100. And I love, I went through yesterday, and I love going back through historical drafts and just finding little quirks. I wanted to see, now we have a good track record from Theo Epstein's first 5 baseball drafts with the Cubs going back to 2012. And I wanted to compare that to Jim Hendry's last 5 drafts with the Cubs and looking at their WAR. And Jim Hendry's drafts look a hell of a lot better than Theo's drafts for the Chicago Cubs between the years of 2007 through Theo's 2016 draft. So I love those interesting tidbits. So we'll talk more draft. We'll talk Bowman. I'm sure many are sick of Bowman talk, but I love it. Low roller scratchers in the house. Let's see. What's he say? Bitcoin is back to 22K. It probably heat wave since you didn't go biking yesterday. We do have a heat wave coming in. It's going to be like 90 and humid today. So today is not optimal bike riding weather. Although I say that, and probably 4 o'clock rolls around, I'm going to go for a bike ride because I love heat and humidity. So you'll find me outside watering the lawn later today. Scott says, can't keep rookie QB cards in stock right now. They're flying off the shelf. I'm seeing a little bit of that. I am definitely seeing an uptick in football sales here recently, and I haven't added any football cards. Sometimes it's hard for me to really pinpoint what's moving because I add like with baseball, I'm adding so much baseball. I added 1,500 cards last week. And when I add that, and I cherry pick, I'm not just throwing a bunch of commons on there. So when I cherry pick, it's kind of a flawed, like, oh, hey, Ken Griffey Jr. selling. Well, I added 200 Ken Griffey Jr. cards. Of course, I'm going to see more sales. But I'm seeing a lot of football sales, and I haven't been listing football cards. So a lot of the football cards that are selling have been in my store, sitting for months. I've moved, and I actually just filed a couple away. Mac Jones, I've only sold 1 out of like 5 cards that I recently listed. I still have a Tua that has not sold. I'm trying to think of who has. So I did sell a Mac Jones. I think I have sold a Tua. Much of my football though is non-quarterbacks. I'm actually, and I don't know, where's my phone? And I don't know, this just could be my, like, I made 2 sales and what I'm basing my thought on. So I'm going to go into sold. I would do football, but I don't think I list football in all of the listings. So let's just see. Sold a couple Kirby Pucketts just now. I'm going to try to find just the last couple football cards. I sold a Willie Galt rookie card. So we're going back to 1984. Okay, this is taking longer than I expected. Here I preface this with, oh man, I've been selling a ton of football. Well, I haven't sold any football. Okay, now I'm into last night. So okay, here somebody came in and bought a bunch of football cards. Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, TJ Watt, Justin Herbert, Randy Moss, Brandon Ayuk, Patrick Mahomes. And then I sold, I mentioned the Willie Galt. There's an Urlacher that's sold. And let's try to find one more sale because all those were on one transaction. Here's somebody that bought a couple Bears cards, Richard Dent, Jim Harbaugh. There's another Willie Galt rookie that's sold, Neil Anderson rookie that's sold. There's a Kurt Warner. There's a Rob Conrad. Okay, so it must have been Saturday and early Sunday that some of those sales. So that's some of the examples, and I have Mac Jones and Tua just sitting in my inventory. So that's interesting now that I actually go back and look. Mark Hoyle's with us. What's up, Mark? Paul Carl, good morning to you. Mark watched a little bit of the draft. Rich says 2009 when MLB Network first went on the air. Only player to attend at the studio, Mike Trout. Atherton, what is up? Great stats yesterday on Henry versus Theo. Thank you. I love diving into the draft and seeing some of those quirks because, Theo did hit on, praise Theo, brought us a World Series to Chicago, the North Side. In the draft was part of that. I think Javi Baez was so instrumental in those good Cubs teams, but he was a Jim Hendry. He was the last Jim Hendry first rounder, 2011. 2012 was Theo's first draft, and it was Albert Almora. Now, Albert Almora did provide some decent games for the Cubs, but really his career really tailed off toward the end of his Chicago run. So it's fun to go back and I think we kind of we see with rose-colored glasses the drafts of Theo because Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, really hit on some of those. The Cubs were like, it was like the antithesis of previous Cubs drafts. Usually the Cubs did not hit on their first rounders and their talent came in the later rounds. I think we can recite, all those first round busts of the Cubs. But Theo really hit on the first rounders, but he didn't hit on anything else. Like you look through the drafts from 2012 through 2020, and it's like, oh my God, put aside the first round selections and really you look at Theo's in the tweet that Brett mentions. And if you didn't see it, I know some people aren't on Twitter. I compared the last 5 Jim Hendry drafts by WAR to date with the first 5 Theos. Now, the numbers are going to be a little skewed because, Jim Hendry's drafts have 5 years in some cases over, over the Theo drafts. So there's it's a little bit older, a little more data to go by. But the last 5 Jim Hendry drafts, this is top 5 by WAR. Josh Donaldson, yes, he was a Cubs draft pick and spent some time in the Cubs organization. 46.3 WAR to date. DJ LeMahieu, number 2, again, yes, he was a Cubs draft pick. He actually was fully developed in the Cubs minor league system, and then Theo traded him for Ian frickin' Stewart. Thanks, Theo. DJ LeMahieu at 29.7 WAR. Number 3 for Jim Hendry's drafts, and this is just his last 5 drafts. So I think 2007 to 2011. Javi Baez, his final first round pick, 24 WAR, and that may actually be less than, I think he might have negative WAR this year in Detroit. Number 4 is a player that did not sign, but Jim Hendry drafted Sonny Gray. And he has a 23.2 WAR to date. Again, Sonny Gray did not sign with the Cubs. Number 5, Josh Harrison. a 17.1 WAR. He did spend a little bit of time in the Cubs minor league system. I was actually bummed the Cubs traded Josh Harrison because he was in low A when they traded him. I saw him a couple times when he played for the Peoria Chiefs in the Midwest League. So if you want to discount Sonny Gray since he didn't sign, the next best WAR for Jim Hendry's drafts would have been Andrew Kashner, 10.9 WAR to date. And of course, he was used by Theo as a trade chip to acquire Anthony Rizzo from the San Diego Padres. So those were the last 5 Jim Hendry drafts ranked by WAR. Now we go to the first 5 Theo Epstein drafts in Chicago. Number 1, Chris Bryant, 29.1. Hey, that worked out. He was Rookie of the Year. He was National League MVP, and he helped the Cubs win a World Series. Number 2, Kyle Schwarber, 10.5 WAR, and some of that WAR is coming in his post-Cubs career, and he's having a great season. Where's he at? Is he in Philadelphia now? I think he's a Philly. Ian Happ, number 3, in his WAR is actually, I think he's close to a 3 WAR this year alone. So his WAR is on the move, on the up. Number 4, thanks Theo, Dylan Cease, who was traded to the Chicago White Sox I think he's in a similar position as Ian Happ with this year's numbers with WAR. I think Dylan Cease has an above 3 WAR this year alone. Dylan Cease, a 5.5 WAR, should be an all-star. Albert Almora ranks number 5. It really drops, doesn't it? 2.6 WAR for Albert Almora. That's your first 5 Theo Epstein Major League Baseball drafts. And look at that. 4 of the 5 were first-rounders for Theo. Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, Ian Happ, and Albert Almora were all first-rounders. I think Cease was a 6th rounder. The reason he fell to the 6th round, though, was he was coming off Tommy John surgery, and he was also there were signability issues. So a lot of teams passed on Dylan Cease in 2014. With those Jim Hendry drafts, I think, let's see, only one of Jim Hendry's first rounders made the top 5 in WAR, and that was Javi Baez. The other guys were later round picks. So that was the tweet that Brett was Atherton32 was referencing. Mark says we got 90s and humid all week here in New England. That's about what it's going to be here. I think it's going to touch 90 with high humidity. Shaw Cards, good morning to you. John Evans says there's a heat wave in the UK. We're not used to it, but it's expected to be 98 or 99. Wow, I didn't realize it even got that hot in the UK. Let's see. Low Roller is checking out my eBay store. He's reporting that I sold some Ric Flair and basketball cards. I did. Terry says bought a 100,000 baseball card collection yesterday, mostly early 80s to mid 90s. That's fun. I did a lot of sorting yesterday. For some reason, mid-July, like around the All-Star break, I just want to sort cards and like watch. Usually the draft's not in mid-July. In the past it's been June, but around the All-Star break, and here we are, day 1 of the All-Star break today. And I don't know. There's something about this time of year, I guess, that makes me want to sit on the floor and sort baseball cards. So that's what I did much of yesterday afternoon. I sorted a lot of the collection that I'd bought a couple months ago, pulling Cubs, and just stuff that I can throw in my eBay store. So I did a lot of that yesterday afternoon and into last night. Cooters in Oklahoma, 104 yesterday, only 100 today, 109 tomorrow. Ed's with us. Good morning, Ed. Johnny Boy Cards, what is up? Good morning. He thinks the draft was cool. I agree. John says 3 million degrees in England. Pasty people are melting. Dan's with us. Morning. I have been working on a hobby-related concept that I will announce on Twitter on day 1 of the National to try and gain some traction. I am excited to see what happens. Interesting. Brian Myers, thanks for the advice on buying bulk. Here he is, Brian, back to report the bulk. Thanks for the advice on buying bulk at a card show. I did what you said to do and was able to get a box full of top-loaded cards for about 25 cents a card. Success! I love it. Brian with success buying in bulk. That is awesome. Zach and Porter, Says Josh Harrison hit Sonny Gray with a line drive over the weekend. It all comes full circle. Juan Soto turned down $440 million. Yeah, and I'm seeing some of the, most teams don't have what it takes to acquire a player like Juan Soto. And it's like, oh, a lot of people think that their organizations have the prospects to pull it off, and they don't. You need like basically two top flight, like top 10, 15, 20 younger prospects. And I'm not talking like a top 20 prospect that's, a triple A, been in the minor leagues for 4 years. I'm talking like young, big talent. And there's not much of that out there. And there's a website called baseballtradevalues.com, I think is what it is. And you can plug in like, this is Juan Soto's value. This is the value that values even minor league players. And I went through, and I think it would have taken like the Cubs' entire top 10 prospects. And in fact, there's a window that pops up and it says, once you get to like 7 players, hey, this isn't going to work. And somebody, it was in a thread that I was reading, and somebody made it work to where I think it was the max amount of players. So it was like the Cubs' top 7 prospects and $45 million. That's what it would have taken for the Cubs. And of course, there's humans at work in these front offices. And would the Nationals want 7 of the top 10 Cubs prospects for Juan Soto? Probably not. Let's see. And same with any other team. It's going to take a pretty big haul. I don't see Juan Soto getting traded just because I don't think it works for either side. I don't think an organization wants to give up the capital it takes to acquire Juan Soto. And I don't think the Nationals want to give up a young superstar and I know he doesn't have superstar numbers this year, but we're at the halfway point of a season. So he's a superstar, and he's a young, what is he, 21, 22? He's young. So they're not going to want to give him up for, some prospects that may or may not even make an impact at the big league level. So I don't see Juan Soto getting traded at all. I think the two sides will come to an agreement monetarily. It's going to be it'll be a crazy contract. I mean, most professional sports contracts now are crazy, but I think the Nationals will end up signing him. George says, why I like vintage cards? I don't have to keep up with prospects. That's a fair point. Zach and Porter talking to Terry. Diego, what's up? Diego's in the house. Let's see. Where are we at here? Zach and Porter. Bo, did you get YouTube picks yet? Epic life-changing stuff. I did not. I texted Zach the other day when he had mentioned the picture-in-picture on YouTube. And I said, this is a dumb question. How do you update an app? Because I think Zach, I'm like, hey, I don't think I have it. He's like, you got to update the app. I had to ask how. He showed me. I updated my YouTube app, and it's still, I wasn't selected for. I don't know if it's in beta or if they're just doing a slow roll, but I don't have picture-in-picture on YouTube, so I was bummed. Let's see. George says even bench warmer contracts are crazy. They don't deserve it. Yes. Bench players. It's crazy. I wouldn't say they don't deserve it, but it's like, it's a crazy number. Herman, what's up? Let's see. Low Roller is talking mega millions. So MLB Draft was last night. And again, I love the baseball draft. And I watched the entire first round. I watched the entire first round, then I watched the supplemental round. And usually I'm like ready for bed at 9:30. And it was after 10 o'clock. They were into the lightning round of the second round. The first 2 rounds were last night, including the supplemental picks. And the Cubs' second round pick was 47. I wanted to find out who they picked 47th. So I stayed up past my bedtime, and they selected a high school pitcher by the name of Jackson Ferris with the second round pick. And I have a card of him already. It was actually in the dime box I bought outright from the card show in Janesville a couple weeks ago. There were a bunch of Stars and Stripes cards. In fact, I've sold quite a few of them out of my eBay store because there were some draft names that we'll get to here in a second. But Jackson Ferris was in there, and I think it's even a foil parallel. So newest, and yes, I do count that as a Cubs card. I count the Team USA 1988 Topps Traded Ty Griffin as a Cubs card. I count the Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, Panini Stars and Stripes cards. There's some gray area when it comes to players like Nomar Garciaparra because he only spent like a year and a half with the Cubs. And he was, if they were drafted by the Cubs, then it's definite. Albert Almora, Bryant, Schwarber, Ian Happ, Joe Carter has some, and he was a first round pick by the Cubs and spent some time in the minor leagues. So those are like more clear cut. These are Cubs because they were drafted, right after they played for Team USA, drafted by the Cubs. But then it's like Nomar, Scott Service was on that 88 team. Those players, it's like I'll take one and put those as part of my Cubs collection, but I don't really consider them as Cubs players just because they spent little time. And Service spent more time with the Cubs than Nomar. But that's kind of how I break it down. Let's see. David's with us. What's up, Dak T-Mac? First day back to work after a river trip sucks. I'm sorry to hear that, Herman. Let's see. Dan thinks Soto negotiates multiple player opt-out points in his next contract. That very well could be. Mark says, I think I sent you 10 Ty Griffin cards. I love Ty Griffin, and Ty Griffin is just one of those, people get excited. I'm going to go into a soapbox rant about the draft. And Zach, I agree. 89 Topps nailed it with Ty Griffin. That's what led me to my love for Cubs cards. A first round draft bust of Ty Griffin. In 1988, Cubs fans, if there was Cubs Twitter in 1988, Cubs fans would be over the moon for Ty Griffin, the hero of Team USA, All-American at Georgia Tech. Like, he's a can't miss prospect, Ty Griffin, and he missed. When I have a Cubs chat in Twitter, a private message chat, and people are upset with Cade Horton's pick. Cade Horton went 7th overall. Now, I tweeted out, whoa, Cade Horton? And it wasn't like I'm upset with that pick. I didn't even see him in like first round mock drafts. And so it's like, whoa, Cade Horton, where'd he come from? Like, I didn't even know who he was. I had to Google him. Cooter knows who he is. Boomer Sooner. But that was my initial reaction was, holy, who is this guy? He wasn't on any mock drafts that I read, let alone any connections to the Cubs. Now he did, like in a post draft interview or an interview last night, he did say there had been talks with the Cubs. So it wasn't like he wasn't surprised that the Cubs selected him. I think when I got all up in the camera, my focus is out. But people are Cubs Twitter like, oh my God, I can't believe we took Cade Horton. Well, the baseball draft in I know not everybody follows the baseball draft, and I think what's good about the Major League Baseball draft being televised now is that it gives the draft more publicity, but it also creates a lot of confusion. And of course, as time goes on, people will understand more and more that the baseball draft is a completely different thing from what you see in the NFL and in the NBA. The NFL draft, your team has the 7th overall pick and takes a quarterback, and he might be your starter in a few months. The NBA, you take the 7th overall pick or the 1st overall pick, the 3rd overall pick, and he could be your all-star year one. That's not how it works in baseball. Your 7th overall pick may not make the big league roster for another 3-5 years, sometimes longer. And in many cases, your first round pick never even makes it to the big leagues, where, in the NFL, your first round pick is most likely, 99% of the time, your first round pick in the NFL draft is on a roster. And I don't know, I don't want to just spew out numbers flippantly, but many of them will be starters year one. And that's baseball. And another misconception with the baseball draft, just because it's, more people pay attention now that it's televised, and there's more chatter on social media about the draft, is teams don't draft on need. I saw in connection with the Mets, the New York Mets, their first selection, I can't remember, actually, I have the board in front of me. The New York Mets had the number 11 overall pick, and they took a catcher out of Georgia Tech, Kevin Parada. But everybody, not everybody, many people are saying, why would the Mets draft Parada? They have Francisco Alvarez, a top 10, 15, 20 prospect at catcher. Well, teams don't draft on need, because just like previous, many times those players don't even make it to the big leagues. And not only that, teams aren't drafting on best prospect available, because there could be look in 2000, what year was it? 2001? The 2001 Major League Baseball draft. Who was the consensus number one prospect in the 2001 Major League Baseball draft? Hands down, Mark Prior. No doubt about it. How come the Minnesota Twins didn't take Mark Prior if he's the best prospect? Because the Minnesota Twins didn't have the money. They could get Joe Mauer on a hometown discount, young kid who just bought a football card out of my eBay store the other day. And, they didn't have to pay Joe Mauer what type of money Mark Prior got with the second pick to the Chicago Cubs. So signability is huge in the baseball draft. So, teams aren't taking on positions. They're not taking on the best prospects on the board. In many instances, sometimes they do. Sometimes it's, we're going to take the best available. Usually the teams that have more money are in that position where they can do that. But a team like the Twins or the Kansas City Royals or the Milwaukee Brewers, smaller market teams with less in the bank account, have to really take signability into consideration. So those are just some of the quirks of the baseball draft. It's laughable to read now. And I do I still read them and consume draft content? Hell yeah, absolutely. I love it. But it's, grading a draft and saying the Chicago Cubs took Cade Horton and he's a terrible draft pick is akin to these basketball organizations ranking the best 6th grade basketball players in the nation, because there's so much development ahead for, a 12-year-old kid and even a 19-year-old kid, 18, 20, whatever it is. Even college players still need that professional development before they hit the big leagues. So it's laughable to rank these drafts and who won the baseball draft in the first round. And it's like, nobody. Or wait 5 years and we might have an idea, because some guys will fall flat and just bust out in the minor leagues. And then some guys, may tear it up and make their debut and all that. So that's just kind of the primer. If you're not familiar with the baseball draft, that's kind of a little, generic overview of how it works. It's nothing like the football or basketball drafts. What's the chat have to say? George says, I did see that some big meat minor league dude wearing an ugly Christmas jersey hit a 537-foot home run. John says, don't get to see much of the draft, but there seems to be a bit of surprise the Rockies drafting Gabriel Hughes at number 10. Let's see. George just linked a Jared Carabas tweet. I'm going to open that in a new tab, see what that's all about. Red Sox took a shortstop first, second year in a row. And shortstop is one of those positions where, like, you can move those guys around, anywhere in the field almost. Cardinals staying true to themselves and drafting pitchers. Leandro Cedeno, and I've never heard of that guy. Leandro Cedeno, Diamondbacks prospect. Let's see. Low Roller says the majority of first-round baseball is a bust. Most players, Baseball Hall of Fame, are late rounds. That's not entirely true. I mean, a lot of the Baseball Hall of Famers being late-round picks is because you're comparing 39 rounds to 1 round. So, take 39 multiplied by 30, compare that to 30, and it's just a numbers game. So, obviously you're going to have more talent overall coming from later rounds just because that's how it is. But I would not say a majority of the first round is a bust. What's up, baseball card curmudgeon in the house? So the baseball draft, there were some names, there were some familiar names, and many times there are not familiar names in the baseball draft. In fact, the last couple of years has been kind of, before I say weak, I want to try to think the last couple drafts. Baseball card curmudgeon adds MLB draft in general is a crapshoot in terms of players' futures, 100%. KBO says, wasn't Piazza the lowest drafted Hall of Famer? He was. In fact, Mike Piazza and Ken Griffey Jr. went into the Hall of Fame the same year. Ken Griffey Jr. was the very first number 1 overall pick to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And in the same year, Mike Piazza was the lowest drafted Hall of Famer. I think Mike Piazza was 62nd round. Abraham says Brewers love guys that can play almost all positions, took 2 shortstops. So there were some names in this year's draft that are familiar, not because they're, Bryce Harper level talent. Bryce Harper was probably the biggest, I'd say in the last 20 years for sure, Bryce Harper was the biggest household name in the baseball draft. But we have household names that have kids that were drafted. How about the family, the family lines in this year's draft? The number 1 overall pick was Jackson Holliday, a high schooler out of Oklahoma. His dad, Matt Holliday, number 1 overall pick, Jackson Holliday, son of Matt Holliday. Number 2 overall pick, Andruw Jones to the Diamondbacks out of high school in Georgia, the son of Andruw Jones. Yes, the former Atlanta Brave fringe Hall of Famer Andruw Jones. His son Drew goes number 2, making draft history. Number 3 is a familiar name because he was a first-round draft pick last year. Kumar Rocker, who it was kind of like a shock that he went so high because in most mock drafts leading into yesterday's draft, he was toward the end of the first round, like mid to late first-round pick. He goes at number 3 to the Texas Rangers, where he will be in the same system as his former Vanderbilt pitching mate, Jack Leiter. Kumar Rocker, also, by the way, if you're a football fan, especially of the Washington Redskins, Kumar Rocker's dad played several seasons in the NFL, Tracy Rocker. So how about that? How about those dads? Matt Holliday, Andruw Jones, and former NFLer Tracy Rocker, their sons picked in the top 3 last night in the MLB draft. Number 4, another highly touted prospect, Termar Johnson, another high school kid out of Georgia. He goes number 4 to the Pirates. Elijah Green goes number 5 to the Nationals. And guess what? His dad was also a professional athlete. Elijah Green's dad was former Pittsburgh Steelers tight end Eric Green. So look at that. 4 of the top 5 picks had fathers that played either Major League Baseball or in the NFL. So that was your top 5. Those are some names. Let's go into the chat before I move on to the rest of the first round. Mark Hoyle, first MLB draft in 1965. Tons of Hall of Famers prior to that. International baseball draft discussions ongoing, but should begin in 2023 or 24. George says Ted Williams said he looked good in the batting cages. He knew what he was talking about. Absolutely. Bloodlines matter. Coaches here with Matt Holliday in Florida for a few years when he lived here and saw Jackson locally in Florida at ages 8 to 11. That's pretty cool. Baseball card curmudgeon adds about Kumar Rocker, drafted 3 times. Yes, he was also drafted out of high school. And he was playing independent ball after not signing last year. Number 6, the Marlins took Jacob Berry out of LSU. Cade Horton went 7 to the Cubs, a pitcher out of Oklahoma. Brooks Lee went to the Twins. Gavin Cross, 9 to the Royals. Gabriel Hughes to the Rockies at 10. Kevin Parada, 11. Jace, is it Young or Jung? Jace Jung went number 12 to the Tigers out of Texas Tech. Now his brother, more bloodlines, his brother is Josh, who's in the Texas Rangers organization. Zach Neto went number 13. Jet Williams, number 14. Dylan Lesko, a high school pitcher out of Georgia, went number 15. Chase DeLauder. And back to the bloodlines, 17 and 18 picks. Justin Crawford went number 17 to the Phillies out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. His dad, Carl Crawford. Carl Crawford's son, Justin, goes 17 to the Phillies. Another former big leaguer's son goes number 18. Lou Collier. Remember Lou Collier? Lou Collier's kid, Cam, graduated early, played JUCO. He's only 17 years old, and he was playing collegiate baseball. He goes pick 18 to the Cincinnati Reds. And I think that's the familial. That's the fan. So that's what, seven sons going in the first round. So a fun baseball draft with some familial names, which I think is really going to carry Bowman Draft. The last couple drafts, we haven't had big names like that with familiarity, where we definitely do that this year. So Bowman Draft, which comes out in December, I think will be this draft class going to definitely impact Bowman Draft in 2022, which comes out, I believe, at the end of December. And typically, you'll see most of those names in Bowman Draft this year. You know, many of the first round names make the cut in Bowman Draft. Typically, they hold like one top prospect out of the draft for the regular Bowman product the following year. So in 2023 Bowman, many times it's the number 2 overall pick. I know that was different. I don't know if it was last year, the year before. So potentially Andruw Jones may be held back to 2023. You know, Topps has, they're in a good position because they've got a lot of names that can carry products. So they can hold back 1 or 2 names for Bowman that can really carry next year's Bowman product, like a Andruw Jones or, Kumar Rocker or Elijah Green, Termar Johnson. So there's a lot of big hitters, no pun intended, out of this. So there's going to be some heavily prospected players out of those first 30 names that were called in the first round in last night's MLB Draft. 30 because 2 teams lost their first round picks. So that was the MLB Draft. I love the draft, so I'm a little biased, but there are some big names that will be highly coveted come December with Bowman Draft's release, in the next April with the regular Bowman Draft for 2023. David says lots of father-son dual autos to be released in the coming years. How cool would that be? How cool would that be with Topps doing an insert set, a father-son insert? Now it's, several years down the road, you got to get these kids in the big leagues first. But how cool would that be? Like say all of these, fathers and sons, make it, or these sons make it to the big leagues, and you do an insert set, father and son, just like we saw in 1985 Topps. We saw it in, was it 76 Topps, father son. And then you have, like, in most insert sets also have autographed parallels where, dual autos of Carl Crawford and Justin Crawford, Jackson Holliday and Matt Holliday. How cool would that be? And, by the time these kids get into the big leagues, Fanatics will have the NFL license. So you could even do crossovers with Kumar Rocker and Tracy Rocker and Eric Green and Elijah Green. How cool would that be? Father-son combos, and you've got the baseball-football connection because Topps will be able to do that. Fanatics has the license starting in 2026. So maybe by the time these kids make it, because a lot of these are high school kids. The Suns. I think all of the Suns are, with the exception of Kumar Rocker. His dad he was Kumar Rocker played indie ball this year after college career at Vanderbilt. Andruw Jones, Jackson Holliday, they were high schoolers. Elijah Green is a high schooler. Let's see. And then Justin Crawford was a high schooler, and Cam Collier basically a high schooler. He did play JUCO, but he's only 17. He graduated early. So all those kids are pretty far out from getting to the big leagues. George says, don't worry, somebody other than the father and son would sign them, maybe signed by a mother and brother or a sister, right? So Major League Baseball draft, the what rounds are today? Because I think it goes through tomorrow. Let's see. What's the schedule? And I should know this. I just know that Monday it starts at 1:00, and it's not on TV. It's on MLB.com, so you can follow the tracker. It doesn't say what rounds. I wish it did. But yeah, I'm gonna be searching for content. I want to see what some of these guys think about the drafts, and it's kind of like any draft review grades, are kind of, it's just like, and here's why they do it. It's basically throwaway content because it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, A, it doesn't matter, but B, it's a complete guessing game. Like, even the most knowledgeable, I mean, obviously the most knowledgeable baseball guys are drafting these players, and many of them don't pan out. And so you have like a nerd like me trying to grade a draft, and it's a total crapshoot. But why do they continue grading drafts, especially like a baseball draft? Because people like me consume that content, and there's enough of us out there that we read those articles, and it draws eyes to those websites. John says draft is always a crapshoot. Remember Kyle Drabeck, right? And it's, and every draft is. I mean, not just the baseball draft, but the football draft, the basketball draft. Those are a little, those are a lot different, but at the root of it, is it a crapshoot? Absolutely. Dak T-Max says father-son dual relics not associated with any player or event, right? George with another Twitter link. What's this tweet? Let's see. Oh, this is great. My favorite part of the draft is reminding everyone how many times Duane Kuiper was drafted. Holy cow. Now, back in the day, there were multiple drafts. There was like a January draft, and I did not realize Duane Kuiper was drafted. So he was drafted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Duane Kuiper was drafted 7 times. Drafted by the Yankees in the 12th round of the 1968 draft, the June draft. He was drafted by the Seattle Pilots in the 9th round of the 1969 January draft. He was drafted again by the Seattle Pilots in the 1969 June draft. Let's see. He was drafted in the 1st round of the 1970 January draft. He was drafted by the Cincinnati Reds in the 3rd round of the 1970 June draft. He was drafted in the 4th round by the Red Sox in the 1971 June draft, and then finally by the Indians in the 1st round, 21st overall of the 1972 January draft. Dwayne Kuiper. And somebody replied, didn't think anybody would top Atabey McDowell. Atabey McDowell. So he was drafted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was drafted 6 times. Drafted by the Cardinals, the Rangers, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Twins, and again by the Rangers, and that's where he's stuck. Interesting. I love those draft quirks, and I have not read. I want to buy Baseball America, and I can't remember. One of the Baseball America writers did a draft book here. I think it was on the 50th anniversary of the draft a few years ago. Might have been like 2015, 16. And I love that. I have a draft book that I think was made in the early 90s. And it's got some of those like quirky, like trivial stats on the draft. And I love that stuff. And, seeing who like Dave Winfield, was drafted by all the professional sports leagues, seeing who got away, like, the Cubs drafted Sonny Gray and he didn't sign. The Cubs drafted Colin Kaepernick. And of course he didn't sign. That guy there was drafted a lot of times. John says Mike Piazza is the other end of the spectrum. Question, which league's draft is the most accurate? It would have to be the NBA. I mean, if you're going by pure percentages, it would have to be the NBA because there's only 2 rounds. And most, basically all first rounders are guaranteed. So your first round pick in the NBA is guaranteed to make a roster, where the second round is a crapshoot, but in many cases, the second rounder makes it. So just in a numbers game, the NBA, and then the NFL has 7 rounds, fairly accurate. But then the baseball draft up until, the last couple years had 40 rounds. And of course, we all know, how, not everyone can make it. So, I mean, just from a numbers standpoint, even a percentage standpoint, the basketball draft, I don't know anything about hockey, so I could not tell you anything about the hockey draft. But, basketball would be the most accurate, and then football, and then baseball, just because of the numbers. There's just, now the baseball draft is 20 rounds. Football is 7. Basketball is 2. John says, I've officially reached hell. It's beyond hot and the pizza sucks. Oh, shit. So I can handle the hot, but sucky pizza, I cannot handle. But is there really such thing as a crappy pizza? I don't know. Like even a crappy pizza is okay. But I get it. I understand your point. Tracy says, good morning, way late. John says, draft talk, you missed nada. They also don't know what the hell a chip is. Meaning accurate to position pick, just using first round data. Oh man, I don't know. I think Michael Rathburn mentioned that last night and said, that there's not really data on, who makes it from a positional standpoint. And, I think when it comes to baseball, it's a tough call because there's so much positional movement, and in a player that's drafted, as a shortstop can move all over the field. And he may, you look at some guys like Ian Happ, he's kind of been moved all over the infield, middle infield, I guess, second base and shortstop. And then you got guys like Javi Baez, who played third base, shortstop, second base. And then you've got Chris Bryant, drafted as a third baseman. Yeah, spent most of his time at third base, but, he played a couple games at first base. He played in the outfield. So it's kind of like, I think it would be difficult to like accurately track that, just because, then you get into kind of subjectives, like, do you isolate to that position only? Or, where do you draw I guess, where do you draw the line? I think it would be, and Cooter says, yeah, Dale Murphy drafted as a catcher. Yeah, there's so many guys that are drafted at different positions. John says, not field position, draft, not field position, draft position. Gotcha. Okay. So draft position, that would be interesting. Just to see. To see who makes it. Michael Rathburn in the house. So Michael was talking field position. John's talking draft position. But to see, okay, the number 1 overall pick, and then it's like, but if you, and this is just, do you do it from okay, I'm going to use the Cubs draft, the very first, Mark mentioned the very first draft in 1965. The Cubs took Rick James, not the Rick James, but Rick James. And he played in 3 games. So Rick James, the Cubs' very first draft pick, did make the big leagues, but he only appeared in 3 games. So, and that's why a lot of times when I just throw out drafts, like yesterday's comparisons of the Theo drafts and the Jim Hendry drafts, I base it on WAR because that's, I know a lot of people hate the WAR and some of these new stats, but, I think it's probably the most recognized and people grasp the concept to an extent of what it means. And I don't think there's another stat that's generally accepted as, okay, what does it mean in terms of value? Because, did the Cubs' very first draft pick, 1965, make the big leagues? He sure did, but he only played in 3 games. Let's see. So I'm going to go back into some more chats. Mark says, I've been to the UK twice. The food sucks. I've heard that. What's up, Boom Slang? TD Sports Cards. I'm in the DR says 40 people in the chat. Don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you, DR. Thanks, Dan. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. TD says my fave is Jets deep dish. Man, I am on board with TD. I love Jets pizza. We did when I worked at the office, last job I had. It was basically spurred by Dave Portnoy was in town for the Wisconsin-Michigan football game. And so he did some of his pizza reviews here in Madison. And we've got some good pizza joints. And so me and a couple of my coworkers, we both love the pizza reviews. And since he was in Madison, it's like, well, let's do our own. So we did a weekly pizza review. And the best part about it was we put it on the company credit card. Yes. So we had free lunch every week. And we created a spreadsheet and we graded, and Jets came out. Jets was either 1 or 2. Now we didn't do it wasn't, if people in here are familiar with Madison, we had to do it from a reasonable distance. Like our office is in Middleton, so far west Madison. So, we didn't do pizza places that were downtown or, on the near east side just because of, 20 minutes to get there. So we only did west side pizza places. So we did a lot of the chains, Jets, Rocky Rococo, which I think is a local pizza place or at least regional. What else did we do? Unfortunately we did not do Casey's. I think we ended up, COVID hit and that kind of ruined our pizza parties. But we did a lot of the chains, Papa John's, Domino's, crappy pizzas like that, Pizza Hut. But then we were able to, there are some local pizza places on our side of town. Let's see. John says, yes, Canada and England have questionable pizza skills. Let's see. John says okay, we got to that. The MLB draft always makes me want to rewatch Moneyball. There you go. Great movie. Let's see. George says, I just poured another pint of draft. Freaking delicious. I was drafted as a trumpet player, but trombone is where I made my name with the ladies. Michael says, I've done some data on high school versus college and hitters versus pitchers and positions. Very cool. The worst is high school catchers, the best college middle infielders. Car Wolf, what is up? Welcome to the chat. Did Tim Elko get drafted? That name does not sound familiar. Let's see. Where else are we in the chat? Let's see. George says this one time at band camp, in terms of guys who make it to the bigs, Bryce Harper was a high school catcher. Michael says by far first rounders, the MLB draft is actually very accurate. Let's see. There's a big drop off after each round. After the third round, it's tough. High school pitchers are awful investments too. His first baseman bust most often. Yeah, like the power hitting first baseman. It's like you're going to be an all-star or you're going to top out in Double-A. Who was the name? Lesko. There was a Dylan Lesko that was drafted 15th overall by the Padres. Dylan Lesko. Oh, that was Elko. Tim Elko has not been drafted. Looks like he is a first baseman out of Ole Miss, but was not drafted yesterday. But it was only the first 2 rounds in the MLB draft yesterday. So 18 rounds to go. Rich says we have Jets in DFW. It's a chain, and I do not like them because they don't sell slices outside of cheese or pepperoni. Let's see. Michael says high school middle infielders and outfielders have the best hit rates. TD says very few high school pitchers actually make it. High school coaches typically use up their arms, and within a few years, you need Tommy John and then get lost in the shuffle. Let's see. Michael says I've tried Portnoy's frozen pizza. It's good. I see it. It's now being carried in the grocery store that we go to, but it doesn't look good. I want to try it, but it's like, it doesn't look good. But if you say it's good, maybe I'll try it out. John says West Side Jets, only the oldies will get the connection. Let's see. Michael says there's a couple Jets here, but was there any compensation for a team if their first pick goes to college? Yes. So, and it happened last year with the New York Mets. They did not sign Kumar Rocker. So they get a pick, basically the same pick or the next pick, in that round. So the Mets got, I think, the 11th pick overall for failing to sign Kumar. George saw Joan Jett in concert. Let's see. Where are we at? Michael says the bust rate on international pitchers got so high that teams have pretty much stopped giving money to them. I guarantee there's no cooler place to be than where I am right now if you like Jets. Michael says my friend's kid got drafted by the Braves, junior J.R. Ritchie, but good chance he's going to UCLA. Let's see. Well, that's disappointing if he goes to college because Fred McGriff was so excited. I loved Fred McGriff. If you watched it last night, Fred McGriff, and Fred McGriff said something about J.R. Ritchie's gonna make some waves or something. I can't remember, but Fred McGriff was awesome on the mic. Rich says, you see, as a New York area person, the only good pizza places are the ones you can buy by the slice and put whatever toppings you want on them. And so as a kid growing up in the cornfields of Illinois, gas station pizza is what you're used to. So I did not grow up in a pizza metropolis. Rich says, notice I joined the chat the minute we got back to the real purpose, the foot chat. John says Rocker didn't go back to college, though. I thought he had surgery, then independent. Well, he didn't sign. So it's the same thing. Whether he goes back to college or if he goes to the independent league. But yes, he did. He went back. He did not go back to school, but he played independent ball. He did not sign with the New York Mets. Cooter says, I was pulling for the Sharks in the Rumble. Google Farnborough Air Show. Rich says, most of the time nowadays you should sign if drafted in the first round. Foot chat only when Rex Ryan is here. Food chat, hard for me to type. But yeah, typically first rounders do. I mean, usually it seems like once a year, once every 2 years, there's a first rounder that doesn't sign. I think a couple of years ago there were like 2 or maybe even 3 first rounders that didn't sign. And why did I know that about Rocker? I don't know. Why did you know that about Rocker? So that's the draft chat. thanks for joining. Draft carries on today, third round, and I'm not sure what else. I think it might be 3rd through 10. Is that correct? 3rd round through 10th round today, and then 11 through 20 on Tuesday. And it's on MLB.com. I'll have it up on my screen, just following the picks and checking it out because I'm a nerd like that. George says, I used to buy the local Toker gas station pizza as payment for picking me up 6 packs in high school. Nice. So, by the way, hit the like button if you have not already. I appreciate it. There were some things that I wanted to talk about. Cooter says, thanks for no national talk. Yeah, no national talk here. There were a couple things, and know that it was not anything to do with the national. I do want to touch on, I'll probably, it's over an hour already, so I'll share it. I did watch the, what we touched on. It was talked about on Hobby Hotline on Saturday. I touched on it yesterday regarding the Go GTS giveaway. I'll share my thoughts tomorrow on that. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about today, and now I can't remember. So I won't. I just won't talk about it because I don't know what it was. So back tomorrow, 7 a.m. Central. Have a great Monday, and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you tomorrow.